Here at ABC15, we have been just talking about a horrendous story over the last few days. It involves the murder of a 10-year-old girl, Rebekah Baptiste. We have been trying to piece together the timeline of how things happened and how her death could have been prevented. I'm ABC15 Senior Investigator Melissa Blasius.
And I'm Ashley Holden, and this has involved talking to quite a few different agencies just because of, based on where we know the family was living, and where that initial call came in, because this was between Navajo and Apache County. And so there was a lot to kind of sift through and sort through and try to get information about. So do you want to start with that initial call?
Yes, let's start with the initial call, which was July 27th. Okay, so there was an initial 911 call, and who was on the call? Let's talk a little bit about that. What did the call say?
Yeah. So based on the police report that we got from Holbrook Police, so Holbrook, Arizona, we know that it was Richard Baptiste, who is Rebekah Baptiste's dad, and Anicia Woods, who were in the car trying to take Rebekah to go get help, and they were calling 911 saying that she had run away that day, that was something that had been taking place, that she was pretty much unresponsive, not breathing. And this 911 call, there are 3 of them, so it appears that they are losing cell service from their home, which is in rural Apache County, and they say that they're trying to get to the nearest place where they can get her, obviously, medical help, first responder help. And so they end up in Holbrook, and that is where police are able to reach the family and able to reach Rebekah. And the 911 operator is trying to give the adults on the phone, Anicia Woods, and the people in the car, kind of just instructions on how to give her CPR. And I think I said this, but Anicia Woods is Richard's girlfriend, and they had just moved to rural Apache County within the last few weeks, and we know that from records that we have, and these are their mugshots.
So these are their mugshots, because things, this is Richard Baptiste and this is Anicia Woods. We can show that things unraveled very quickly from what appeared to be some kind of medical emergency to a murder investigation that it is today, and what led up to the murder of this little girl. Let's talk a little bit about the family situation. Yeah. She was living in rural Apache County with dad's girlfriend, and 2 siblings in a yurt, which is basically a few feet wide, circular, tent-like structure that they were living in. Mom had no custody, no contact for a while?
Did not have custody. From the time that we talked to Rebekah's mom and grandma, it sounded like for a time they were able to visit. And then what they tell us is there were times that they were kind of kept away by Richard and Anicia. So all of those details we don't really have. We only have what, mom and grandma have told us, which is that they were kept away from seeing some of the kids. And we've heard that from other family members as well, who told us that they were told the kids were always in trouble and they didn't end up being able to see them. But this move was very recent. And I do want to also say that when we went through that police report, Rebekah passed away 3 days after those 911 calls here in the Valley at Phoenix Children's. And police officers note in their reports they could see bruising, they could see a cut, they could see that she appeared to be malnourished and was not breathing. So a very serious call there. But in terms of the family situation, we have this family who is living in Phoenix, and according to court records, Phoenix is where Richard had been living for quite some time, living in Phoenix, and then moved to a very, very different, location than the city.
So as we've heard some more, and it looks like a murder case and child abuse that's now developing here. You and I started to ask some questions, like the Department of Child Safety. Had they had involvement with this family? Were they on the radar? We quickly learned that yes, they were on DCS's radar from our understanding for quite some time. We're still trying to work out all the details and the timeline of that, though, because DCS hasn't told us very much about what went on in the months and years from their aspect.
Yeah.
But you actually got a chance to talk to the school where Rebekah was attending until this past spring, and they said that they were trying to get help for these kids for a year and a half.
Yeah, they
or so.
say for quite some time. They told us originally, they had reached out to DCS 12 times over the last year. We're kind of getting more fine details of that it was from November 2023 until this year, that they say that they have these 12 dates that they were calling DCS and reporting what they call suspected abuse or neglect for Rebekah and her two siblings that were going to the school. They did tell me, I was just talking with them a few minutes ago, and they were telling me that at the end of the school year, there were quite a few staff members that were concerned that Rebekah would not make it back to school the next year, that they had been alerted that the family was moving. They hadn't been officially withdrawn from school, so the kids still would have had a seat at the school, but they were very concerned because they had been reaching out, and they say that they had been seeing these signs, even alerting Phoenix police through their school resource officer, who we're told did a home visit and saw for himself bruising. And so
we've been trying to get a hold of Phoenix police for several days now to see what they can tell us about what the school resource officer did or didn't, or how much involvement the local police here have had in the last few years. Still trying to get some of those answers directly from them. But the school is at least saying that a police officer literally went to the house.
Yeah.
One of the really unusual things that we've seen in this story is this email from DCS last night that tries to say the school did not call 12 times. They say that their records show that the school called just 5 times. Yeah. And then they say of those 5 times, only 1 time met their statutory requirements to move forward. But I've never actually seen DCS do this in such a way where they're saying, well, they're not right, but we haven't told you the rest of the story yet. But the numbers conflict fairly significantly. So we're trying to get to the bottom of how the school district's showing us receipts for, like, this is the case person worker's ID number that we talked to. This is the person who we were told taking the case. This is the date that we called. And then DCS's very different account of what the school sent them. And one of the things that DCS was saying was that some of these calls didn't have the statutorily required information. Yeah. But this is fairly basic information, which might be concerning, because, I mean, it seems if you're on the phone with somebody that the school district would have known this kind of information, that the victim's currently under the age of 18. Well, Rebekah clearly 10 years old.
And her two siblings are both under the age of 10.
The victim is a resident present in Arizona.
Yep.
That the victim has been physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, neglected, abandoned, or exploited by a parent, guardian, custody, or member of the household, right? So they're saying they saw bruises. They're saying they saw...
Or hungry.
They saw other things. And then that the identity or current location of the child victim or the family is known. Well, the kids went to that school every day. So the question is like, how did they think they were reporting the correct stuff 12 times, and DCS is like, we only had one real valid report we could go on?
Well, and I asked the administrators at the school, what did they think when they saw DCS's response? Because I sent it to them yesterday and on Wednesday, and I was saying, what did you think when you saw that? And they said that they were shocked, but obviously they're saying that they have reached out 12 times and now this is where we're at. But, they feel like wasn't one call enough is what they told me. That's what they said. But in their statement to us and the information that they give us, they give us the ID numbers, the workers' ID numbers of who they talked to. They say that they were told that this case was assigned to the same DCS supervisor who did come to the school one time to follow up on all of this. And I think one of the important things is that they say that outside agencies have told them, now we don't know who those outside agencies are, have told them that others reported to DCS. They say at least 20 times about concern for Rebekah and her siblings. That's a lot of time. So we have a lot of questions that we're still trying to get, sorted out and information from DCS, and we've sent them specific questions. So we're hoping to sit down with them soon, to talk with them soon, and get their records as well.
and a timeline of exactly how this happened. Because
Yeah.
one of the things we don't know that we're asking questions about is, did DCS know where the family has been in the last few weeks? Did they
Yeah.
know that they were no longer in Phoenix, they were now in rural Apache County, and were they able to track them? Or is part of this that they vanished while they were being looked into?
Yeah. And that move happened, like I said, we have court records now that show that it happened, just a few weeks before this, that Richard had actually gotten a job, had only worked at the job, he says, one day. So that kind of paints a picture of how early on this move was. And that's, again, from those records. So, and in terms of court, that's going to be, as we see, a process, right? Court in itself is a process. So we've been getting some of those documents, and we had Woods and Baptiste, Richard and Anicia. They were in court earlier this week, and that's where we learned, the prosecutor said that these kids were subject to horrendous conditions. They described injuries not only that they say Rebekah had, but that they also say her siblings had, and they were reading from, a medical document that was provided to them, and torture was on that medical document. And that's hard to hear.
Because that's what so many people who were around this family thought was happening for all this time. And at this point, the only thing that we can get everybody to agree publicly about is that they really cared about this little girl, that she was a beautiful little girl, that and that everyone who had any contact with them, who now know this very tragic outcome, are just so heartbroken. And at some point, you have to move beyond just talking about how heartbroken you are and talk about
Change.
What failed this little girl.
Yeah. And I know when I talked to the school, I told them there are many times when something like this happens, we don't hear from an entity like a school district. And I asked them, why did they want to speak out? And they said, this is in no means to be some kind of attack against DCS. It's that they feel like they need to use their voice because Rebekah can't use her voice now, and they want to spark change. They want to make sure that whatever possibly failed here does not fail again.
And DCS, in part of what they have told us, at least in the last few days, is not a lot of specifics about this child and this family, but about their overall operating procedures. They talk about when they do have an allegation, when they go to investigate, they have to use a safety assessment tool. And they talk about how they got to find the child, and they got to find the parent, and they got to get the child to talk to them, and they got to get the parent or the guardian to talk to them, and that they can't compel someone to participate in their investigation, and how disheartening that must be to hear all of these kind of details that DCS is putting out in the context of what's happened, and you wonder how so many concerned people could think that they were doing the right thing, and still this little girl is in harm's way.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions of how we got here that we're still trying to sort through. And we know from sources that these kids were at one point in foster care, and then at this point, most recently, they were back with dad. So it's kind of retracing those steps. How did we get to this place? And we're still asking those questions. I think kind of a behind the scenes of it that I want to let people know, we hear from people that like a tip, but then it sometimes takes a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of time, a lot of talking to people to get all the information. And so we're getting it, but even more of this we're still waiting on, and we're still pushing for answers for sure.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of questions, and some entities we haven't heard from at all at this point, like Phoenix Police and what their involvement may or may not have been.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to push for those answers. Let's take the last few minutes and just talk about who Rebekah Baptiste was, because you did talk to a lot of people who knew this little girl. So tell me what they're saying about her, and that how her life is going to be remembered in the coming days.
Yeah, well, they say that she was the sweetest little girl, that she was very smart, and I think a lot of teachers and community members with Empower College Prep, the school that she was going to, are hurting because they truly, truly loved this little girl. They even shared a poem that I put on my social media that she had written. But she loved pink, she loved dolls, kind of what you would imagine a typical 10-year-old little girl would love. But the school has taken it upon themselves, and they are working with family. They want to throw her a celebration of life, so it's going to be 1 week from today. So August 14th at 1 p.m., and they're encouraging people to wear pink, and that is open to the public. I did ask. So, there's so many people that have read this story and they might want to remember Rebekah or get involved, and this is a way that they could just honor her. And even her mom and grandma were hoping that people come out because they want to honor her. When I was sitting down with them, it was a really, really emotional conversation. They repeated many times that they don't really know where to go from the point that they are at. But when they heard about the celebration of life, they did want to encourage people to come out because as they're going through this immense grief, they do want to honor and celebrate Rebekah's life. So, and I do want to point out in terms of dates that are coming up, we have a preliminary hearing for both Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods that's coming up on September 4th in Apache County. So we're going to be looking for that as well.
And a lot of people grieving, a lot of people feeling the impact of what's happened to this little girl in the community, that they can come out and they can support and say, we care about this, we care about what's happening to Arizona's children. Yeah. We should say that Rebekah is one of three girls who have been either in foster care or recently in foster care in the DCS system or other foster care system. One was in the tribal foster care system, who have been murdered this year. 3 kids in foster care, just out of foster care, murdered in our state. And so
I do want to say, Emily Pike, we still don't have answers in her case.
Yeah, and we know that this is important to you, so stay tuned to ABC15 and ABC15.com for the latest on all of these cases.